Welcome to Let the Quran Speak. I'm Aisha, your host. In our series on virtues and vices, we'll be discussing how we can better manage what we use on a daily basis, our words. The famous expression, sticks and stones will break my bones, but words will never hurt. I heard this phrase growing up in school, but I never fully believed it. Because the truth is, words are much more powerful than we think and have the potential of causing a great deal of hurt to those around us. Let's talk to Dr. Shabir Ally about how we can better manage silent restraint and our loose tongue. Welcome to the show, Dr. Shabir.
Pleasure to be on.
So we often hear the saying that, if you don't have anything good to say, then don't say anything at all. So how does this, tie into the idea of loose tongue and silent restraint?
Well, one has to strike a balance between the two things. The saying you're referring to actually comes from a hadith reported that the Prophet, peace be upon him, said, let the believer say something good or be silent.
Yeah.
One should look for the good in the situation and try to say something that's befitting the situation, something good, something that will encourage other people towards goodness. And if you don't have something good to say, well then be quiet. Some people have the idea you must have conversation going on all of the time. But you may not have anything good to say, so silence is also golden. In Arabic also there is an expression that if the speech is of silver, then the silence is golden, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And sometimes we speak of a person speaking with a silver tongue, right? So maybe the speech is pleasant, but silence also has its worth.
But what about in a situation, so there's also an Islamic concept that I was taught at least that, if you see something wrong, it's your responsibility to put a stop to it in whichever way you can. And sometimes, you're using your words. And sometimes what you have to say when you see something wrong may not be the most pleasant thing to say. So how do you approach that in terms of finding that balance between using the right words but not saying too much, but saying what you need to say?
Yeah, one has to strike that balance. In the Quran it is mentioned, لا يحب الله الجهر بالسوء من القول إلا من ظلم. God does not like that something harsh should be said and broadcast in public, but he makes an exception in the case of the person who has been wronged, which means that the person who has been oppressed or wronged has the right to actually squeal, to voice his or her opinion on the matter and say and complaint and say, look, I have been wronged. But other than this, God does not like, according to the Quran, God does not like for people to be, using harsh language and loud voices and so on in public. So one has to strike a balance between the two things. Yes, you're right. There is that saying that if you see something being done wrong, if you have the authority, you change it using that authority. But if you don't, then you speak out against it. So you have to say something which some people may not like, but at the same time, this becomes now your responsibility.
And it's also within order, right? So making sure you are speaking up, but also in light of that you're not backbiting, that you're not gossiping, which unfortunately has sort of become a norm to a certain extent in our communities.
Yes, perhaps because of so many evils that could be associated with the tongue. Some communities before us had actually prescribed silence as a way of worshiping God. We know that in some religions, silence is actually maintained for some lengths of time. And in some previous religions that are associated with Islam, silence apparently was a way of observing. Observing of silence was actually a way of worshiping God. We know
in
this
a gathering?
Well, we know from the Quran that Mary was instructed that when she approaches her people and she's carrying her baby, if anyone were to ask her anything about this, she should say, I have vowed a fast to the benevolent God, and so I may not speak to any human being today. So that may mean that the fast implied that they wouldn't speak. Their fast involved silence as well. So being silent, restraining oneself from speaking, obviously avoids so many sins. And Islam, in its present form, strikes a balance in saying that, yes, you have to speak, so you're not required to vow a period of silence, but when you do speak, watch your tongue.
What about, and on that note, let's talk a little bit about profanity, because that's also another issue. We see it in the media. I know I see it in the workplace where, you know, people use certain words that I would consider profane language, but they use it within sort of a normalized conversation. So how do you approach that when it's become, again, another, I would argue, a norm in our society?
Well, we have to try and change that norm and try to awaken people to the realities of what they have become accustomed to. People become accustomed to different fashions, they become accustomed to certain trends. At first these things are shocking, but over time they become normalized and people accept them. The use of swear words in movies now are very common, and a PG movie will get away with sometimes with one of these foul words voiced, maybe in a situation of anger or something like this, and sometimes the utterance of another one, but in a half-mouthed manner. And it still gets a PG rating, which means that some of our children will be exposed to this. And the use of sexual innuendos is very common. And we see this even in TV shows which are obviously meant for a more generalized audience, and at least this is easily accessible to our children. That this kind of foul language, either with the utterance of some known foul words or these innuendos, it becomes very common. And believers, Muslims, Christians, Jews, others who are concerned about the decline of morality in our modern times have to try and do what we can to alert people to this troubling trend.
What would you say to someone who says, well, a particular foul word maybe is used in the workplace or in TVs, for example, media, and it no longer maybe has a foul language type association. So it's acceptable in society, and if it's not harming other people and they know what I'm trying to say and maybe I'm making a joke out of it and they don't have an issue with it, then why should I be so concerned?
Well, and some people may make the point even stronger. I've heard it said that if you're angry, you need to use a certain word in order to
express it, yes.
to let people know that you are really angry. Otherwise, they wouldn't get the point. But we should say that we say to all of these people that the objective does not justify the means. Yes, the objective is good. You want people to know you're angry, but that doesn't mean that you're going to use every means that's available. And just because everybody is doing it doesn't mean that it is right. And people who uphold good standards, because our standards are rooted in our belief in God, we should uphold those standards regardless of the fact that everybody around us are doing something wrong. We can't just simply follow the others, but actually we should lead them to what is right. If we have the opportunity when we're sitting over coffee or something like this and they say, well, Aisha, how is it that I don't hear you using this kind of language? Then that's your opportunity to say, well, because I believe that morality is declining, and we want our children to be born in a world, not only a world that is environmentally safer than we're making it out to be, but a world that is also morally more upright than we have made it to be.
What are some, that's a very, I don't know if I can muster up all that in a conversation with someone, but what are some ways that I can practically start controlling my tongue? For example, there are a lot of people they're in environments or have friends who, for example, backbite, or around people who swear a lot. What are some practical ways of dealing with that?
Without suggesting the practical ways, perhaps for the lack of time, I will mention a few things which, they say that love teaches the way of love, right? If you have the intention to do this, then it will come naturally, and the intention can often be spurred on by the sayings of the Prophet, peace be upon him, and from verses of the Quran. In terms of sayings of the Prophet, peace be upon him, there are a lot that in fact encourage us to guard our tongues. It is reported the Prophet, peace be upon him, said that if a man could guarantee me two things, I'll guarantee him paradise. Guarantee the protection of his tongue, and guarantee the protection of his private parts. If the person will guard these two things, then the Prophet, peace be upon him, is guaranteeing that person will enter paradise. So we have to think about guarding our tongues. On another occasion, a young disciple, a companion of the Prophet, peace be upon him, asked him for advice, and the Prophet, peace be upon him, held out his tongue. Sometimes the reports from the Prophet, peace be upon him, show that he was like quite graphic because he wanted his teachings to be registered.
Oh, so to actually physically holding
Yeah,
back his tongue, okay.
so he held on to his tongue. He said, restrain this. And this companion was surprised. He said, Messenger of God, would a person be responsible for the things that they say? Because he probably is thinking that, if you harm somebody physically, then obviously that's terrible. But, you say something, then what's the big deal? So the Prophet, peace be upon him, that said to him, do you not realize that there is nothing that plunges a person deeper into hell than the harvest of his tongue? So what can the tongue do? The tongue can create a lot of harm. There is backbiting. There is slander that could ruin a person's reputation. There is tale-bearing that could cause a rift between people. There is lying, which could actually cause a lot of devastation in our society. And lying, as you know, has now become very commonplace. People think that you have to lie. If you don't lie, you can't get ahead, and so on. So all of these things are mentioned in the sacred traditions. And if we remember these, then you will know what to do in a situation. Every situation is different. What can you practically do? Well, you will know what to do if you keep in mind that this is essential. I must do this. I must restrain my tongue.
You've given myself and I'm sure the viewers a lot to think about. So thank you, Dr.
I'm sure you
Shabir.
don't have much to worry about in this
Who
regard,
knows? You
but
never
may
know.
God guide us all.
Thank you, Dr. Shabir.
You're welcome.